Integration and Global Political Economy, Institute for European Studies at UBC. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Professor Hübner, and I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Thanks so much, Larry, and thank you for hosting me, for your interest. Good evening to everybody. Yeah, Brexit, that's the big topic of today. What I'm doing now immediately, I move over and share the screen with you. So this should work. And now let me see, play that you see the right kind of things. There we go. I hope you can see that. So it is now 1 year and 2 weeks ago that the UK left the EU. It is 2 weeks ago that we see the end of the so-called transition period. And now the UK is a sovereign state, and the European Union has shrunk, so to say, from 28 to 27 countries. So that's where we are. So it's a pretty timely topic. I suggest from the very beginning to think about Brexit not as an event, even though it happened, but to think more about it is a process. You know, the best way to describe it would be, let me just now see how this, it's not, let me just sharing. First kind of problem, it's not moving. Why not? One moment, please. My PowerPoint is not, there we are. Okay, you may be familiar with the Eagles, and there's this lovely song, a song I love very much, Hotel California. I can't sing it to you, but you know the phrase. You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. And that's the kind of starting point for me, really thinking about Brexit as something that has now come to a particular kind of point, but it will continue because there's the geopolitical location between the UK on one side and the EU on the other side. And there are all those kind of topics both entities share, and you have to deal with them. What I want to do today is first looking a bit at the process that led to a Brexit, then talking about the TCA, that's the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, that's the name of this most recent agreement between the UK and the European Union. Then I will talk a bit about, let us say, the economic dimension, what can be expected, and then I will go a bit deeper. We have to understand more the details of the history, the implications of Brexit for the UK, also a bit the implications for the European Union, and then looking forward, talk a bit about what all this means. Now, you're familiar with this person, Boris Johnson. He's the one who was, at the end of the day, there was before Theresa May, and before the whole thing started was David Cameron. Boris Johnson is the one who hands up, who showed, this is a picture done immediately after his last talk with Ursula von der Leyen, the head of the European Commission, when it was clear that now this agreement will be put in place. You know, that's not a way to look at it. So long, suckers. I mean, this is a cartoon with a kind of bias. The EU is moving away, and there's this small boat, a kind of emergency situation on the side of the UK, but still the spirits are good. So long, sucker, so to say. That's the kind of biased way to look at it. There are some commentators who would exactly say this is the picture that really nails the kind of situation. Others would say that's we should turn it around. It's a kind of different thing, and I hope I can provide some kind of input how we can think about it. Before we come to this kind of assessment, let me remind you, Iman, there are high aspirations when it comes to Brexit. There are big promises. For example, Jacob Rees-Mogg, this is the head of the kind of very Euroskeptical faction inside the Conservative Party. He was saying, what will happen when we leave the European Union? It will be a golden age for the United Kingdom when we are free of the heavy yoke of the European European Union, which has bowed us down for generations and made us less competitive, less efficient, and higher cost. All of that will be gone, and we will be singing hallelujahs. Liam Fox, he was not the last one, but before, the chief negotiator for the UK, he was making this point. The free trade agreement that we will have to do with the European Union should be one of the easiest in human history. And think about how long negotiations have lasted, how at the very end, a very kind of thin agreement has been agreed upon. And as I mentioned, what this agreement will imply for the future, namely more negotiation. Michael Gove.
Kurt, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
We've had quite a few people asking, where's the slides? Are there supposed to be some slides as you're talking?
Oh yeah, there should be. Sorry for that. Okay, let me just go back here. I have to go back to I did a screen sharing. You need the slides, no doubt about it. Let me just, one moment, let me just go back. I don't know what happened. There we are. And now I have to go back to my Zoom thing. Back to meeting. No. Can you see it? Can you see it now?
Yes, we can see it now.
Okay, good. Then let's keep it this way. Can you also see the left side, all the slides, or only the main slide?
We could see the left side as well. Left slide, the thumbnails as well.
Yeah. Let me just, if I do this one, can you see it now?
Yes. Now we only see the one slide.
Okay, good. Then it's okay. Okay, so you haven't missed too much, but I go back to this one. And this one, this is Boris Johnson. After this phone call, I only show the slides again. This is the cartoon I mentioned. That is very biased, but still gives one kind of way to look at Brexit. And here are those citations I just gave you. The last one, Michael Gove, saying the day after the vote to leave, we hold all the cards and we can choose the path we want. So this is pretty much the kind of sentiment before the negotiations started. This means these are more the kind of sentiments starting June 2016 and the next couple of months and years. Now, that's my problem now. I can't move the slides for some reason if we have this kind of picture. So I'm very sorry. I need to stop the sharing. So this wasn't clear. Can you see it now?
No, we can't see anything now, just yourself.
Yeah. So this is, let me just go back. Then the only way to do it is
with the thumbnails.
Yeah, with the thumbnail. Sorry for that.
That's fine.
Yeah, but should not happen, but it happened. There we are. Okay, then I go back to the meeting. I share screen. Can you see it now?
We could see it with the thumbnails, and that's fine as long as it works.
We have to keep it with the thumbnail. And for some reason, I don't know, is it the way it works? So, as I mentioned, there were quite a lot of high aspirations and motives what they were driving this Brexit decision. Here you can see Brexit now. We want our country back. So it was a lot about sovereignty. we had this, I have to move it here. There was those kind of signs. We didn't win 2 world wars to be pushed around by a crowd. You see Angela Merkel here. This was very kind of loaded, a lot of ideologies, a lot of ideas that really was driving the Brexit decision, saying we want our own kind of sovereignty back. There was the promise also, we send the EU £350 million a week. Let's fund, if we leave the European Union, let's fund our national health service instead. Vote leave. This was before COVID, obviously. So the famous red bus was actually based already. There was never a transfer of 250 million British pound per week. Actually, the number was much lower. But again, this is happening in those kind of campaigns. So there was a lot of aspiration. There was a lot of arguments, but most of them were driven actually by kind of normative convictions, not so much based really on facts. So all this, as you know, led then to the referendum, the outcome of the referendum. I come back later on, and only to briefly give you the latest update. Now, that's the agreement, TCA, the trade and cooperation agreement between the European Union and the UK. And if you think about it, then put it in this way, giving away 5 elements and getting back 2 3/4. So, when you are a member of the European Union, you're a member of the common market. So there's the freedom of trading goods, there's the freedom of trade in services, there's the freedom of capital movements, finance movements, the freedom of movement of people. And then also it's an element not part of the customs union, but part of a membership in the European Union, the so-called, you're an element, you're part of the so-called customs union. So this is before the UK left. What did they get back now? They get back the freedom of trade policy because they left the customs union. Means now, and this is the sovereignty element, now the first time the UK has really the sovereign right to make trade agreements with the rest of the world. It's not handled via the European Union any longer. There are no compromises with other partners. They have their fate in their own hand. That's good for them. That's exactly what they tried to achieve. The UK got conditional tariff and quota-free access to the common market for goods. So, there is you may have read in newspapers, there's no tariffs and quotas for British goods going to the European market and the other way around. But actually, therefore, the condition, this is only true for goods that are to majority produced inside the European Union, or if you have input of particular kind of things, think about cars, then the other elements, the other input elements must be produced inside the European Union. So if you think about it, if you look around in your room or what you're wearing and so on, a lot of stuff we are dealing with is part of global supply chains. Some elements are produced in China, in Vietnam, in various parts of the world. As soon as a particular share, and it differs for various goods, is above a particular limit, then British goods are no longer tariff and quota free. So there is this kind of condition, and already the 2 weeks after the end of the transition period, we see first kind of problems that some goods no longer can be sent from the UK to European markets. Then also, only goods are tariff-free and quota-free that are fulfilling the regulations of the European Union. That's the reason why we have now all this kind of paperwork, the trucks, the ships, the aircraft that are transporting goods. They all need to do a lot of paperwork now in order to make sure and to demonstrate and to prove that the goods being sent from the UK to the European market and the other way around, that they are exactly fulfilling particular kind of regulatory provisions. So, it's not really a total free access. The UK got back the control of movement of people. So now everybody needs passports. You can't, a Polish worker, a Romanian, a Bulgarian worker no longer can easily fly into London or to another airport in the UK, apply for a job and getting a job. They need visa. It's very, very complicated, working visas. All this is no longer holding, but this was part of the common market. So if we would go through all this, I don't go through all these elements. I can provide you with the slides later on. If you would go through all those kind of elements, you can see this statement that that even goods are totally quota and tariff-free is not really totally valid. We have now borders, border checks, and all this means as soon as there's a border, and we know how it works when you go from here to Seattle or so, it can be pretty complicated for people, but also for goods. Now, one of the most important part, obviously, is there's a power asymmetry, because the so-called rules of origin. The EU has the largest market. The UK market is much smaller. If you think about who is setting the kind of the conditions, who's defining the rules of origin, the kind of regulatory schemes, then usually the larger partner has more power in really making the case what kind of regulatory elements needs to be fulfilled. So there's this kind of asymmetry, and we will see this will play out in the next couple of months and then also years. Number one. Number two, what is not in the agreement. The service sector makes up 80% of the British GDP, 80% of the income. And the core is the finance industry. The finance industry of the UK is probably the most competitive in the world, the City of London. We all know those kind of things. And it's not really dealt with in this trade and cooperation agreement. The service sector is totally out. Means UK financial institutions no longer can, in the same way, provide the same kind of services when it comes to EU-related financial transactions of all kinds, investment banking, exchange of money, there's a whole kind of thing. So in order that they are able to do this, they need a so-called a passport, a particular kind of passport. This is called an equivalence agreement for the financial industry. So the EU has equivalence agreements with the US, with Switzerland, and with a few others, the most important places, but they're only valid for 1 year each, and they always need to be renegotiated. And for those ones of you who are following European politics, they may be aware that since quite a time, due to the fact that Switzerland was not fulfilling in other areas conditions of the European Union, Swiss banks haven't got any longer this passport, this equivalence, right? Means they were punished hard. They're losing business, so to say. So there are a lot of elements that are not covered with this trade and cooperation agreement. In this regard, everybody is clear about it. This agreement that is now regulating the relations between the UK and the European Union is a very thin agreement. And this requires already, based on this on the state of affairs, that we will see the next couple of years a lot of ongoing negotiations for particular sectors, the finance sector, for other elements. A lot of things are not being dealt with. They need to be renegotiated. Still, the final agreement avoids the Australian deal. This was this funny word being created and used by Boris Johnson, the Australian deal. As it turns out, there is no agreement between the UK and the EU and Australia. So Australian deals means nothing else than no agreement at all. So this situation has been avoided, because this would have been an economic and probably also political catastrophe. So the thin agreement, this TCA, is there. It's a kind of second best. So it's better than nothing, but the argument can be made, it's still a lose-lose event. With a lose-lose event, I mean, when there are definitely losses for the European Union, they're losing an important partner, they're losing an important member state, they're losing an important market, particularly for some countries, and it's a lose event, a lose process, a lose agreement in terms for the UK, because they lose a lot in economic terms, in absolute and in relative terms, actually much more than the European Union. And this little thing here, you only need to look at, there are those kind of red You can see a red and blue things. The red one would be a hard Brexit. This has been avoided. You don't need the kind of details. The blue things is here. This line here, the vertical line, you can see on the left side, there are net losses. On the right side, there are net gains. And if you would go through the whole kind of thing, it's very small, then there are only a few countries actually that are experiencing positive gains due to a soft Brexit, the kind of TCA, if we label this as a soft Brexit. And this is actually countries outside the European Union. So it would be Israel. Israel would actually benefit the most because trade that is no longer happening between the EU and the UK would be diverted towards Israel. There are some winners. The US would be a winner, Canada, New Zealand, Australia. The net gains are very, very small. The real thing is all those blue things here, and those are really losing countries. So all European countries, more or less, are losing out at the very top: Luxembourg, Norway, Netherlands, but also Germany, Sweden, France, and so on. But the largest loss, according to this kind of simulation, this kind of modeling, is actually borne by the UK. And if you think about it this way, for the UK, the EU market is the most critical market. If you are adding up the market volume of goods that is being sent from the UK to Europe, to the European Union, you add it up, then it's more than the market share of the US, other advanced nations, China and India together. So, and this is something, the puzzling thing. Why is a country leaving a very comfortable trading situation with the European Union, the largest market, and risks to get punished with tariffs, quotas, and with the fact that significant sectors will not be covered by any trade deal? Still, so there's not really a lot of economic rationale behind it. You would usually not leave your golf club that offers you all those kind of perks and nice things, and then try to come in again, and you would have to pay high fees and all those kind of things. So that's really the kind of situation Brexit can be thought about. Now, there are thousands, so to say, not thousands, but really at least 200 simulations out there of various kind of ways how we can think about what will be the effects of Brexit in the kind of medium term, the next 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years or so. This is a most recent forecast by the Office of Budget Oversight. That's actually independent institution from the UK government. And the most important part here is there is no deal. This is no longer relevant. This has been published in December before the Brexit agreement has been achieved. But you can see here, we all talk about the negative economic effects of COVID, and that's the blue line. And it's definitely, it has been, the idea here is the simulation shows us the sort of various quarters. As you can see, this goes over a lot of like 20 years perspective. With COVID, there's a huge downturn, then it getting stabilized, but then it's kind of stagnation. The green one, this would be the most recent, the TCA, this agreement. You can see the effect actually of Brexit, the negative effects on GDP of Great Britain is larger in terms of Brexit than of COVID. So this gives you a kind of impression that we're really not talking about small amounts. Brexit actually is creating a lot of economic losses in the European Union, but much more so in the UK. And again, it's not that the cost of Brexit only will occur in the future. The losses already occurred since the referendum. Again, there is a reddish line here and a straight line here, the dark one. And if you put the EU referendum, June 2016 here, then if there would have been no referendum, if there would have been no Brexit decision, GDP would have grown in a kind of steady way for the next couple of years. You see here, actually, the real GDP went down already. And this tells you quite a lot. Investors, households, a lot of people were getting totally nervous. Uncertainty was reigning. And the effect is you save, you try to hold back and so on. And the result is that the growth dynamic is getting weaker. And that's exactly, again, it's the source is a National Institute for Economic Research, a state run, but from government independent institutions, so a pretty serious one. And you can say the costs already are there. In other words, the UK as such, without the referendum, would have been richer in terms of GDP than they are due to the fact that the referendum happened. You know, the other element is the last kind of big figure I show you. You know, I told you that the fact that the UK left the European Union, one element has to do with the sovereignty control of the free movement of people. This was a huge kind of emotional issue, also because Brexit decision happened at a time when the European migration crisis occurred. And what you can see here indeed is the number of immigrants in net terms from EU countries has come down. This is this line here, has come down since the referendum enormously. But, you know, what we see also, the number of non-EU citizens migrating to the UK has increased much more. So we only see a kind of a change in the composition of migrants. It's not that with the Brexit referendum from June 2016, that the UK would have been now experiencing lower migration numbers. You know, not at all. Migration numbers increased. Only the number of European citizens has decreased enormously, and the number of non-European citizens has increased enormously. So I don't think so. This was the expected outcome, but you know, that's the way things are sometimes happening. So this is the kind of a situation. Now let me move a bit, looking back a bit. I mentioned already, from a purely rational perspective, one really can ask, why is the EU, is the UK leaving the EU its most important market? Also, why is the UK leaving an institution that already offered them over the many years a kind of a special treatment? The special treatment means the UK is the only country in the European Union, or used to be the only country in the European Union, with a high number of so-called opt-outs. Means the UK was not participating in a lot of programs of the European Union. You're aware, there's a British pound, they don't have the euro, but that's the easy part. But they also didn't share the Schengen agreement, the kind of mobility of people without borders, where if you have a European passport, you can move around the European Union without showing a passport. And it's actually not only European Union countries, it includes Switzerland, Norway, a couple of other countries. The UK never was part of this agreement, and a lot of others. Also, Margaret Thatcher was extremely successful in negotiating with previous EU commissions a very impressive rebate. So the UK never contributed the same kind of share according to the rules like other countries. So there was a huge budget rebate for the European Union. So, it's a thing about a golf club. You're a kind of special treated member and still you decide to go. So this is the difficult kind of question. Now, for those ones of you, and we're all belonging to this similar kind of age cohort, I think so, at least most of us, we know there was always a very kind of complicated history between the UK and the European Union. But after World War II, then in the 1950s, when we see the formation of the European Union, this was first a union of 6 countries, that then culminated in the Treaty of Rome. The UK was never a participant. They never were interested in entering. There was this kind of glory thinking about, we have a special relationship with the US, and we have the Commonwealth, and this will be our market, this will be our partners. It turned out that the UK economy was actually running during the 1960s in enormous problems. It was the first Western country that experienced a huge debt crisis. They had to turn towards the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, in order to get credits to survive, to deal with their current account crisis. And so slowly they realized, not being part of the European Union, where all those kind of countries actually had this kind of economic magic years, the golden years, high growth rates, full employment, all those kind of things, they slowly realized maybe it's better to apply. They tried to do that, but they were twice rejected, mainly by the veto of France. This was at a time France President General de Gaulle. He was not happy of any application of the UK because France felt, and some others, not so much Germany, some others in a similar vein, they thought so. The UK is nothing else than the kind of loudspeaker for the interest of the US due to the special relationship between the US and the UK. If the UK joins, out of a sudden, the US is sitting on the table. This was not in the interest of many others. And only when President de Gaulle died, then we see a next kind of attempt, and the UK entered the European Union in 1973. This already also was a very kind of complicated year. Then we have this wars in the Middle East, we have the economic crisis and so on. But already in 1974, Labour, the Labour Party, the leader Wilson asked for the first referendum because Labour also was very divided about should we really be part of the European Union, and they didn't like the terms of entry for the UK. So there was a referendum: should we stay in the European Union? Only 1 year after they just entered. And the result was 65% of the voters who participated voted yes. So it was a pretty clear sign. A majority of the citizens of the UK really wanted to stay in the European Union. So we see then a kind of up and down in the relationship between the UK and the EU, probably most prominent with Margaret Thatcher. Margaret Thatcher was not happy about the policies of the EU, too much red tape. She was really highly critical, but in their famous speech in Bruges, she made a case saying, you know, there's so many things you have to criticize with the European Union, but only Europe is our future. We have to sit on the table. We need to negotiate. We have to voice, to really make clear our interests. We have to negotiate those kind of things. And what she did then, actually, I mentioned this already, by staying, really making the case to stay inside the European Union, she also negotiated those kind of very, generous budget rebates the UK is enjoying until the very end. If you go then further, we see Tony Blair. I mean, he was very much Europe-oriented. We see improved relationships within the EU and the UK, and a very, very strong engagement. I also should say, if you think about that, I mean, it's not the main critical argument, but for example, this whole concept of the common market, probably the most important achievement of the EU when it comes to economic affairs. The common market has been designed by the British commissioner at the time. So it was really very much a British concept, free mobility of everything. And so, there is this kind of relationship. Things changed more or less, because we have always seen a group of Euroskeptics inside the Conservative Party, the backbenchers. They were some of them were really radically Eurosceptical, and this was for a long time a kind of noise that could be ignored to some degree, but the noise became stronger due to the fact, nothing to do with the European Union. We see in the 2000s, and particularly then the 2010s later on, the rise of UKIP, the United Kingdom Independent Party. Nigel Farage, the kind of right-wing populist party that was really making the case that everything that is of evil has to do with the European Union. We need to leave the EU. Nigel Farage himself sitting in the European Parliament. So, and this party has become stronger and stronger. Now, if a conservative party has competition on the right kind of periphery, so to say, the one way to deal with it is moving yourself to the right. So the conservatives backbenchers, their voice has become more and more, not only louder, but more and more recognized inside the Conservative Party. On the side of the Labour Party, they were never really strong European fans, but for them it was the opposite argument. Brussels, in their eyes, was too neoliberal. not really progressive enough. So I don't even think about Corbyn then at the very end, who never could make up his sense how he could feel about the European Union. So Labour Party also was not very supportive of membership in the European Union. Now, David Cameron himself, pretty pragmatic and somebody who was in favor of the European Union. He thought, so, okay, I need to deal in my premiership in order to deal with other things. I need to get rid of this whole issue, membership of the European Union. And he came up with this idea. It was not forced to, actually, it was not really a kind of topic at all in British politics, but he came up with the idea, okay, let's now have a referendum and let's decide this Europe question forever. And he was encouraged by the fact that only briefly before the idea of the referendum on EU membership came up, there was not a referendum, the Scottish independence referendum. And the Tory party had to agree that the Scottish are allowed to hold a referendum whether they would leave the UK or stay. And it was a pretty exciting referendum, but it turned out David Cameron, the Conservatives, made very good arguments, and the Scottish independence referendum failed. And Cameron was saying, okay, I was successful. I showed the British electorate that I can deal with those kind of independence questions easily. And this was the encouragement he needed to move forward to the referendum June 2016. Pretty much convinced about the outcome. It will happen, So let's move here. So, I mentioned already all this kind of opt-out. So really the question is there was no reason for doing this. And it was really out of the moment to say, okay, I want to bury this question at all. So let's go for it. So the outcome of the referendum, as you all know, was a huge surprise, including a surprise for the Tories. They were not really thinking that this could happen. So to some degree, one can say it was an accident. The outcome was an accident. There was nothing was planned for this kind of outcome. And one way to look at it is this one. You may recognize those people. The right side, you see the first group of negotiators on the side of the UK. This was the first meeting, the negotiation group of the UK and the negotiation group of the EU were meeting. This before they started to chat, the photographer came in and made this kind of picture. Is there something what you can detect here?
No documents.
Exactly. The right side, the British, this was such a laughing stock. They had no documents. And look at the EU side, they had relatively huge piles of documents. Means even another way to illustrate there was not really any kind of preparedness. They came and thought, so no, it's an easy kind of thing. Whereas the European Union, if you think about it, the European Union is nothing else than a huge negotiation machinery. You have 28 member states, or now 27, and they need to compromise on everything. So the EU negotiating day and night, if you would like, and that's exactly reflected here. So they knew there were all these kind of things that need to be talked about and settled, whereas the others were laughing here, but not really doing a lot. So the outcome, as I mentioned, a kind of surprise, and there was not really a plan B. How should we move forward? And all this was made up on the go. And this already brought a kind of strategic disadvantage on the side of the European Union. And then more, it's not only the outcome was close, but it was an outcome that showed, okay, we want to leave. But not everybody was on the same page. And most critically, you know about it, Northern Ireland and Scotland, in both cases, a strong majority of voters voted to stay in the European Union. You have now the UK, a kind of composition of those various entities, and you have two, Northern Ireland and Scotland, that were in strong ways indicating we are not interested. It's not in our interest to leave the European Union. And this also was creating immediately a kind of a policy problem, but also a problem how to negotiate for the UK if there is this kind of split, this kind of division of views. So Scotland, Northern Ireland, they are the Remain camp, and it was not, it was recognized, it was clear it's an issue, but actually, due to the fact that this whole outcome, leaving, was so surprising, the first couple of months or so, not a lot of people were thinking about the implications of all that. So what unfolded then over time was, we see, first of all, it needed a so-called withdrawal agreement. You can't only leave the club. No, there may be investments, there are all the kind of things. Think about the thousands of British people working in the European Union with their pension claims, the fact that there are payments to do in this multi-annual budget, and. So how to withdraw turned out to be pretty complicated. It's a slight mentioning in Article 50 of the Treaty of the European Union, the so-called Lisbon Treaty. That's the most recent treaty of the EU. Actually, this Article 50 has also been designed by a British very early on. But there was no practice. Nobody knew about how to leave the European Union. This was it's a first. So this withdrawal agreement entered into force February 2020, closer to a year ago, and it implies, so to say, a lot of payment over time, 70 billion or so, but it's a small price actually. British and the UK and the EU were really compromising relatively elegant ways. Most important, it also included, this withdrawal agreement also included a protocol on Ireland and Northern Ireland, because leaving the European Union means now that on the Irish island, you have the South, the Republic of Ireland, you have Northern Ireland. Out of a sudden, the outer border of the EU is in Ireland, between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. So this would really, if there would be a hard border, this would come back, violating, first of all, the so-called Good Friday Agreement, and then bringing back all those kind of times of the Troubles, where there was really a physical border with controls, really making clear there are two different entities. And the Good Friday Agreement was supposed not to be violated. And Theresa May was really, let us say, realistic enough to see, okay, we have to find a way. And this Northern Ireland protocol on Ireland and Northern Ireland made a case in order to avoid a hard border on the Irish island. Northern Ireland is supposed to stay in the regulatory reign, in the common market, if you would like, of the European Union. The rest of the UK is outside the European Union. If Northern Ireland is part of the common market, so to say, those kind of regulatory schemes, there's no need for any border on the Irish island between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. So Boris Johnson and Euroskeptics said, no way, this is something, that's a dividing, we are giving up Northern Ireland, that's something we can't do. And until the very, very end, Boris Johnson tried really to hold to this kind of statement. This will never happen. But then again, the US already signaled, if this will happen, if really there would be a border in Ireland, then we will not even think about to talk with any UK government about trade agreements on, because we are not supporting such a kind of step. Only in the last minute, 3 days actually, before this TCA was then settled, Boris Johnson and the Conservatives said, okay, forget about it. So now we have this Irish protocol there. Means one very important implication, the UK hasn't left the European Union, at least not a common market. It's only England, Scotland, and Wales left. Northern Ireland still is part of the common market, of the regulatory scheme of the common market. So this you can imagine, this will create in the future enormous tensions, because given the fact that Northern Ireland the majority of voters didn't want to leave the European Union. And now they are belonging to, at least in economic terms, to the European Union. How should they also be at the same time British citizens? So there is a kind of cleavage, there's a kind of tension there, and this will play out over time. There is the other element, Scotland. As you know, it's now on a daily basis in the newspapers. The Scottish government, pretty strong. They have a vast majority, the SNP, the Scottish National Party, and they are driving hard the case to say, okay, Boris Johnson, this government, you must allow in the next 2 years or so a EU referendum. At the moment, it needs the kind of yes on the side of the UK government. The Johnson government is not willing to do that, but I think so the pressure will be increasing. There we see now the kind of the conflicts with the fisheries, the fishery industry, particularly of Scotland, is hard hit by Brexit. So there are tensions also with Scotland. So one implication may be actually, that with leaving the European Union, the UK may end up as, put it this way, Little England. There will be definitely constitutional crises occurring in the UK over the next couple of years about all those kind of questions. Okay, so. And this goes on. There is the most recent border poll. How would you vote for Northern Ireland if there would be a possibility to leave the UK and to join the European Union? And what you can see here, for Northern Ireland to leave the UK and join the Republic of Ireland, this means also joining the European Union. The most recent one, Lord Ashcroft, that's actually a conservative pollster company, saying it's very close. 51% overall are saying we want to leave the UK, 49 want to stay. Okay, with the nationalists, that's Sinn Féin party, but it's a party that is winning votes across, also in the Republic of Ireland, becoming a very strong political party. 98 would leave, only 2% would like to stay. With the unionists, that's actually exactly the opposite. The interesting part is, so to say, the younger people are, the more the interest they would like to leave the UK. And that's another argument. We will see an overaging of the population. Those older ones, if they are gone, the younger people, they are not interested to stay in the UK. They want to stay and be united with Ireland and to stay in the European Union. So it's another reason why we can see with this kind of situation that actually the outcome of Brexit, an unintended outcome of Brexit, may be that a question that was not really on the political agenda is now returning: Irish unification. So there are all kinds of data there that indeed Irish unification is moving forward. A similar situation with Scottish independence. So all this kind of polling, pretty much the same on the most recent one, and what they all agree upon is that Scotland in many regards is different than the rest of the UK, and that Scotland's future is much better inside the European Union as being part of the UK. So it's another kind of a change of sentiment, particularly since the Brexit decision. The referendum, as mentioned, failed. But if there would be a referendum today, I think so there would be probably a yes on the side of leaving the UK. The other question is whether the EU would allow them to join. That's another tricky question, but only the sentiments means those data, those kind of polling indicate that Brexit is not done, as I mentioned at the beginning. It's a process, and there will be all kind of critical situations. And this is the poll from, it finished December 3, 2020, not only, let us say, a month ago or so. So in hindsight, do you think Britain was right or wrong to vote to leave the EU? And what you can see here is, over a longer period of time, the share of citizens saying it was a mistake that we voted to leave the European Union, this share is much higher than the share it was a right kind of decision. Means actually, when that's another kind of puzzle, the conservative government negotiated now a agreement, TCA, leaving the European Union with the support of Labour, also this kind of divided political party, but the decision to leave actually does not have the support of a majority of voters today. It was different in 2016, but the world in 2020, end of 2020 or beginning of 2021, is different than the world June 2016 when all this happened. So again, more or less on an argument that is pretty difficult. Brexit is not finished. It will continue. There will be a lot of struggles. So, and now, Iman, the big task for the Johnson government is now, they must now make sure that Brexit is, at least in economic terms, a success story. And they need to not only make convincing arguments, they need to show and to deliver. Now with COVID, the fact that the British economy is suffering, they're not alone. All economies in the Western world are suffering due to COVID. And, making the kind of distinction, is it Brexit, is it COVID? It's difficult, at least for non-professionals. And so that's a political opportunity for the government to say, it's not Brexit, Brexit is all good, it's all COVID. So, but still, they need to have a good strategy. A strategy also that brings and delivers benefits immediately to Scotland and also to Northern Ireland, because as I mentioned, those are the two entities that are really close to create a lot of political headache. So making the UK to a global trading nation, this was the kind of the suggestion of Boris Johnson. And, the idea was we will be easily being able to make all those kind of trade agreements. As a matter of fact, it turns out so far there have been not really EU trade agreements. That's also a bit of the kind of critical thing when I'm reading newspapers. There was 3 months ago or so, there was across the board, CBC and Globe and Mail and the Canadian media were saying, oh, the UK and Canada just closed a EU trade agreement. That's not true. There's CETA, the Comprehensive Economic Trade Agreement between the EU and Canada. And what the government of the UK did so far with many parts of the world is so-called rollover agreements, as far as this was possible. It means for the moment, as a kind of transition phase, the same rules than in CETA are now applied for the UK outside the European Union. That's not a new trade agreement. The new trade agreement will need a lot of time. And so far, the UK was not successful really to reach any kind of important new trade agreement. And Johnson is also in a kind of difficult situation. You may be aware that he was one of the big fans of Donald Trump and Donald Trump of him. He was saying Johnson is the Trump of the UK. And it was a kind of close relationship. Now with Trump soon be gone, and Biden being very critical with the UK due to the North Ireland policy, it will be difficult for the UK to really negotiate a big kind of EU trade agreement. So in other words, this Make Britain Great Again, based via making a global trading nation, will be difficult. Also, trading nation means for the UK mainly financial industry. In all other regards, they have huge trade deficits with the rest of the world because there's not so much industry any longer in the UK. So the City of London still, I think, so will be resilient. They are very creative, but it needs time, and they need workers, specialists, professionals from outside. That's the reason why the mayor of London asked always for this kind of special treatment. And so far they didn't get it, but it may happen. So 2 more points. The UK actually has the lowest productivity and labor productivity record of the whole OECD world, not only in the last few years, since the 2000, means the UK actually is a low productivity economy. I mean, if you would compare it, let's say, with Israel or so, total different kind of thing, high tech, very low tech. There are some areas where they are good, but not across the board. So it needs huge efforts. And this may be actually the chance and opportunity for a Johnson government. The Johnson government is not really a regular kind of conservative government. So they don't care so much about public debt or so. They are really favoring industrial policies. They will be very aggressive in the sense they are aware there are problems. They will put a lot of money and incentives in all those kind of areas, but it will be costly. And now with COVID, maybe some of those costs are too high and they have to stretch the whole thing. So I'm also skeptical about the future opportunities, how they in time, when it needs time, let us say in 10, 15 years from now, maybe a bit better, but the rest of the world is not staying still. So they are now in a kind of competitive race outside the European Union, and this will be something that is not so easy. And think about last point, only because that's close to my own heart. The Johnson government also was saying in before this TCA, saying, don't worry about British universities, top universities. You will not be negatively affected from what we are negotiating. But as a matter of fact, the UK left the Erasmus program. The Erasmus program is this program that brings hundreds of thousands of students from across Europe to those various kind of universities. It's the largest student exchange program in the world, and it's not only a kind of exchange, it also brings this kind of identity. And our British students no longer can, within this program, go to European universities and the other way around. So it's also taking away opportunities to learn about others, really to cultivate relationships on a kind of non-governmental level. And that's a kind of a sad kind of implication. There are definitely other areas where we see similar kind of thing, but that's happening in a divorce. There are always victims in divorces. Not everybody is happy, and so that's the kind of situation. Okay, thanks for listening and for suffering through my tour d'horizon. My apologies for the problems with the screen sharing, and feel free to ask all those questions.
Some people have put questions into the chat. Maybe some people who pose those questions would like to just ask them themselves by unmuting themselves and asking the question. Anybody wants to step up?
There are already quite a lot of questions. The first ones were all about the slides. I'm so sorry, but I don't know what happened. Yeah. But let me just say, back in the 90s, I think they predicted blocks like the EU and NAFTA would be the future of trade. Do you believe that prediction is no longer valid as a trend? Is Brexit a canary in the coal mine? Yeah, we see definitely a kind of reformation of the global economy. And this is very much the fact that unlike the 1990s, where still the US was the strongest dominating economy in the world, with the rise of China and the internal problems of the US, things are changing. And this leads to reconfigurations. Now, all countries need to find ways to form trade agreements, to negotiate those kind of things. The question now with Brexit is, do you think you are more successful in those kind of trade negotiations, particularly with big countries of the global economy, all by yourself? Or would you be better, your interests better defended if you are pooling resources? The EU is nothing else than an organization that is pooling resources, being aware that each of those European countries, think particularly about the smaller ones, Denmark and so on, Sweden, they're very open to the world markets. But if they would be all by themselves, they wouldn't enjoy the same kind of trade agreements, the same kind of terms of trade than they are as part of the European Union. So in this regard, I think so the formation of blocs will be more important. And we may see now under Biden, I don't know, maybe it needs a second administration or so, that unlike under Trump, where it was everything was unilateral. Maybe we see a return of, let us say, a kind of regional multilateralism, where countries are, for particular kind of purposes, are pooling their resources, are formulating joint policies. And this is probably mainly against China, really to be powerful enough, because if they would only try to go alone, they would not be very successful in achieving those terms they would need. So I would say a block building in another way is still highly relevant. Mel is saying, I have 3 brothers in the UK, one pro-Brexit, one anti, and one on the fence. The younger generation wanted to stay in due to freedom to move, but the older generation did not like the lack of control over immigration from Africa and Eastern European through EU and so on. So, first of all, this is one of the things, the kind of misleading information. Some people would say fake information. The EU has not a kind of migration scheme that would not allow the control of, let us say, migrants coming from Eastern Africa, wherever they're coming from. That's up to each member state. The EU is only, the free mobility of people is only for European citizens with a European passport. And that actually was a demand of the British government at the time when the common market was negotiated. Free mobility only means it's not refugees, it's really people like you and me. If you have European passports, I can go there, I can apply for a job, and I can't be discriminated due to the fact that I have a particular passport, but it's a passport of the European Union. And then, that's fine. So that was the idea. So the migration policy against the rest of the world, the non-European citizen, that's up to each country. So the UK would have been able, and was able actually, to control, nothing to do with the European Union. Brits also hate to be controlled by EU parliamentary bureaucrats. That's another kind of thing. The European Parliament actually is not as powerful as the Canadian Parliament, but still it's a parliament. But the parliament is not, in this regard, bureaucratic at all, because it's a parliament. You could say there's a European Commission, and indeed the EU is quite a law and regulation machinery. One can say it's necessary to do this. If a common market, you need to have standardized protocols, you need to have standardized rules and all those kind of things. And all this is creating paperwork, but it's the same in one country. I give you an example. When we here in Canada, we don't have a common market. But if I would go to the Okanagan and then later on would visit friends in Alberta, and I think so, I would bring them a box of wine or so, 10 bottles or whatever it is, and I cross the border between BC and Alberta, I'm a smuggler. We are not allowed to do those kind of things. So that's there are many other elements. So Canada has no common market. I feel I suffer because it takes away competition. It takes away opportunities. The EU created this common market. It's the largest market in the world, but each market needs common rules. And that's something that is being created actually then, and controlled, also controlled by governments, controlled by the parliament, but then being created by the European Commission. I think it's a normal procedure. Sometimes, it can be nasty. It's maybe you think it's too much or so, and they can overdo, but that's the character of each kind of bureaucracy. So there's nothing special in that. I don't want to defend it, but I think so we should also be aware everything needs a kind of common rules. We have to share those kind of things. So Marcus was saying it was a massive miscalculation by Cameron on the Scottish referendum. He thought he would win it easy, but the Scottish referendum, he won actually, but this was maybe the reason why he was so encouraged to do the same kind of coup with the EU referendum, and this was the really miscalculation. So that has been really a kind of a miscalculation that created this accident, an outcome nobody was prepared for. And this may be really the tragedy of the whole thing. If you are threatening to leave a club, then you should have plan B. Let us say you're really successful in leaving it. You fulfill all the kind of conditions you need to fulfill. You have to pay your debt, you pay all those kind of things. Then you need to do, what are you doing now with the sovereignty, with this kind of freedom? And this is something that was really not a part of the campaign. It was never clear to what purpose this all will lead. What is the reason for all that? It was more or less based on this kind of sentiments that were, they were so strong and created this kind of outcome. How can you say that the UK citizens are sorry for voting for Brexit, given the landslide Boris Johnson received in the last election when he argued to leave? That's so true, But we also know elections are not a kind of single item event. There are two reasons for that. I think so. Why he won, if you think where he won in particular, this was the parts that are usually the parts of the UK, parts of England in particular, where usually the Labour Party is extremely strong. And then you have this kind of totally messed up Labour Party in this kind of situation. Nobody was aware what Corbyn stands actually for. Some of them were saying, well, he's much radical in domestic policy terms. Then he had no really kind of stance when it comes to the membership of the European Union. So it was a party in disorientation. Then you have this anti-Semitic element in it, so that another cohort of traditional Labour voters were not supportive. And all this was in excellent ways exploited by Boris Johnson and the Conservatives, who really made the case. But I wouldn't say that people voting for the Tories at the time were voting for Brexit, because this was on the agenda. It was voting for other items. And in this regard, he is in this perfect situation that he has this huge majority, even though now, due to incompetence of some of his ministers, he seems to be still in a kind of difficult situation. So Robert Schwab is saying the EU is a stagnant and prejudicial organization, read Varoufakis. And the UK now is free to set fiscal policy and to deport terrorists that the EU Court of Human Rights protected. Latter case, the EU was never part of this. The human rights part was opted out. So they didn't sign up for this. They were never part of it. They could have done with all this kind of people, whatever they like to do. Fiscal policy, the UK is a standalone. It's not part of the monetary union. Also was free to deal with fiscal policy, whatever they like. Actually, one of the policies they took over a long time, and then also this was followed Conservative as well as Labour, they were pretty much in the camp of those austerity, and they really took away money for the National Health Service, for a lot of welfare things. And this is now shown as very negative when it comes to dealing with COVID. The public infrastructure for dealing with those kind of public health crises is no longer in place due to the fiscal policy of those governments. Nothing to do with the EU. This was totally a decision by the governments of the UK itself. There was no intervention on the side of the EU. So Alan was saying the vote was advisory and very close. Why didn't the government say, we will study implications? Yeah, but there were a lot of studies actually. But again, Michael Gove made a case, we don't need experts, we don't believe in experts, we know what to do and where to go for. So I think so, again, it was not this kind of rational decision that led to Brexit. Neither was there any kind of rational way to deal with the outcomes. This was now all driven by ideology, sentiments, hope, and still is. That's the reason why I would expect there will be a lot of disappointment. You need to deliver something. You need to have a plan to deliver, and I can't see this until today. So. Jacob Sneg was saying, Ken Livingston said UK cannot afford to stop immigration because it needs immigrants for high education professionals, as UK education system does not produce them. Is it one of the reasons for low productivity you have mentioned earlier? Definitely, this is one reason. When the UK is a bit like the US. You have this kind of elite universities, excellent universities, really, they are leading the pace, pretty much like the few in the US. Then you have a education system in a broader sense that has come into all those kind of problems, troubles. One reason is under financing, the other reasons for that. And you need high-skilled workers in order really to be productive. This is one reason. There are other reasons for the low productivity. That's really a huge issue for the UK. This also leads to the fact if there's low productivity, you have low wages, you have income, you're running into all those kind of problems. And that's the only sector with high productivity and really a strong sector, the financial industry. And then again, this is also equipped with a lot of people from abroad. You have all kind of experts coming there because the city of London really is the kind of brings the lifeblood to many parts of the world, and you can actually earn a lot of money. So where are immigrants coming from post Brexit? They're coming exactly from some from Asia and then from Africa, Northern Africa in particular, and then India, former colonies where they have easier access to the UK still. I mean that's still the case. So we see this kind of in the composition of migrants. And again, if you think about from a sheer number perspective, Brexit hasn't changed anything. But it changed actually is only the composition. So and if you don't like the Polish and the Romanian, Bulgarian plumbers and cleaners and other people, cooks and nurses in particular, National Health Service, if you don't like them, you can substitute them with other people, no doubt about it. But it doesn't change. I mean, I don't understand. The British are hopefully not racist. That it would say, okay, we don't like British, Polish, but we need others are fine or so. I wouldn't think about it this way. But the result is the number is either is increasing, the composition is changing.
I have a question.
Sure.
You pointed out that Israel will have the most to gain by Brexit. To what do you attribute that?
But this is based again on simulation studies. It's more or less that some of the products that are currently or until recently traded between the UK and the EU are part of global value chains. There's inputs from other parts of the world putting together, but not in terms of not simple stuff, my high-end stuff. And this will now be there will be now high tariffs for those kind of things, or even quota. And European suppliers and producers are now looking where can we find different kind of sources. And Israeli companies are in some of those sectors very strong, as we know. And then they cancel contracts with British companies and look somewhere else. And Israel is one of the countries that may benefit. Again, we are talking about relatively small amounts. It's not if you look at it, but still, it's significant. It can grow. So the relationship between, in this case, Israel, but also some Canadian companies may benefit. And this is also detrimental for the UK. Mainly. So we will see this kind of change in trade flows when it's only starting, but I'm pretty sure what you already can see, there will be quite a couple of sectors, where for them it's not, because now we are really talking red tape. Before there was no paperwork for the exchange of goods between the EU and the UK. Now each single product needs to be registered and do extra paper. That's the conservative government was saying we need to get rid of the European bureaucrats and this red tape. And the trade agreement creates exactly this kind of red tape. It wasn't there before because it's necessary, common market, you have this kind of common rules and that's it. And now we are back to the paperwork. And we see this kind of, you have heard about it. We see now, for example, it may be only a kind of teasing problem, but I could see it will be more critical. We see, for example, supermarket shelves in Northern Ireland are getting empty because we have now this kind of border in the Irish Sea, and grading and bringing stuff from the UK to Northern Ireland, what was the practice in the past, needs now paperwork. And it's getting much more cost intensive and more time consuming. And all this is creating problems, so to say. And that's the hard part of Brexit. You leave a common economic space, and what you're getting is you have sovereign, no doubt about it. Sovereignty is increasing, but also you're getting all this kind of paperwork, and you only can continue trading if you fulfill those particular kind of criteria. And then I'm saying again, power asymmetry. I mean, it's really the regulatory power of the EU is, given the size of the market, it's much stronger. So there will be adjustments necessary. They will happen, but it needs time and again, cost intensive. So it's in economic terms, a loss event. Yeah, feel free. You can. Yeah, do you think there is a lesson for Canada here? Yeah, I mean, what I hope for when it comes to Canada is, that we may go back to a more cordial, a more kind of adult relationship with the United States of America, rather than the one we had, where we still until the very end, we are getting punished with tariffs, aluminum, steel, and so on, with the argument that our neighbor in the South is telling us Canada is a security risk for us, and therefore we are allowed to do this kind of tariffs and so on. So I hope so that that we learn that to really appreciate, so to say, the advantages and to deal with the disadvantages in more in better ways. And that may be something, if you look what's happening with Brexit, it also leads to a situation in the European Union. We have just 27 countries that are really fighting each day about their own interests very, very hard. So it gives them the kind of, it looks like the EU is a very kind of weak, internally divided entity. And to some degree, that's true. On the other side, all member states were on the same page, because they are now aware leaving the European Union is very, very difficult. So the question always is how to unscramble scrambled eggs. I guess it's not possible, And so the lesson for the other EU countries was very, very important. For Canada, it's more or less, let's move forward and let's do. There's the CETA. There's a lot. Canada and the EU have a strategic partnership. There's a lot of common ground, whether it's the climate policy, many other things, also in security regards, and cultivating relations in a kind of equal footing way with the European Union is a much better way than being than dealing in a way the UK is dealing the EU. So this was a kind of a negative learning experience, I would say. And it needs time for the UK to heal and we have a highly divided country, obviously, not only as for the UK as such, but again, think about Northern Ireland and Scotland. I mean, I don't have any kind of preference for the Scottish Irish unification, Scottish independence. I don't care too much about that, but it creates instability, tensions, and that's something that's never good for a country. And given, the kind of the importance of the UK for the rest of the world in various areas, it would be better if it would be united, if they would be able to deal with those kind of challenges. But with Brexit, those challenges have increased enormously. And at the moment, I can't see really how to solve all those problems.
Why did Brexit come up in the first place? What caused the whole issue to, 10, 15 years ago now, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, it's as I mentioned, it's a long-standing kind of tension between the UK and the EU. The UK always belonged to the camp. It's not the only country, to the camp saying, we should keep the European Union as a common market, as a trading area, as a kind of economic area, and don't invest too much in those kind of political union dimension. Now, what we can observe in the last couple of years is, and there's this famous saying from Jean Monnet, one of the founding fathers of the European Union, the EU is integrating via crises. And the last big crisis, as we know, the Eurozone crisis, actually led to policy responses, if you think in bigger terms, where integration actually has increased. There is deeper integration than ever. A lot of countries are giving up sovereignty. in order to deal with problems. That's something that is really was never in the interest of the British. Now, from the very beginning, when I start my first class in European integration for my students at UBC, I'm telling them, what is the EU all about? And then, in order to make the puzzle clear, the EU is a kind of an organization that is constituted by the deliberate transfer of power from the nation state to something new, a supranational organization. If you think about it, governments of Europe are giving up power, decision-making power, and transfer it to something else in order to improve the situation. That's unheard of. I don't find this anywhere else. But think about if there would be let us say a currency union between Canada and the EU and the US, but like the common currency. And then the suggestion is, let us design this common currency between Canada and the US in the same way like the EU. Then the US would have one vote and Canada would have one vote. That's exactly what's happening. The Deutschmark, Germany, was the second strongest currency in the world before the currency union. Now it's the euro. They were giving up their central bank power, transferring with one vote. Malta, part of the Eurozone, has the same kind of vote in Germany. So means, this is this is the puzzle. How are they doing this? And then you can see, okay, the way it's then being organized and how they are negotiating and so on. This also, it requires trust. It requires a lot of things. And I guess it's a good thing, rather than this kind of power games we are observing in other parts of the world. So the EU in this regard is a huge machinery that lives up from the fact that national governments are willing to transfer power. Now, some governments are saying that the British, it's too much. And we see, like in Italy, the populist parties, right wing in other parts, France, Marine Le Pen, and so on, they say all the same. They say, we want to get our decision power back home. Sovereignty. This means anti-EU. There may be sometimes good arguments when we have to think about it, but that's the kind of the thing. But the trend over the last 50 years has been more transfer of power from the nation state, and the nation state is it's still powerful, as we can see with COVID. It's still there. It's not. It would be crazy to say everything is in Brussels. Not at all, but some elements of power have been transferred, and that's how this whole EU thing is working. So
Interesting.
yeah, that's an interesting kind of concept.
We'll take one more question if someone
Sure.
has it. We're starting to run a little towards the end in time. Does anyone have one final question?
Yeah, there's here. UK is already seeing the first benefit of operating independently around COVID. First country to approve the Pfizer vaccine and so on and so on. Yeah, this has been the case has been made. It's you all know, everybody who has some knowledge about the thing. That's it's pretty. It's a joke, so to say, more or less, because the UK was using something, a accelerated, limited permission for the first vaccine, where the European Union and others, for other good reasons, were saying, okay, we are running through the whole kind of process. We don't give, for this particular vaccine, in order to make sure that nothing goes wrong, we don't give this kind of emergency permission, even though it would have been possible. Number one. Number two, as you know, there's also even the way you're writing it here. I wrote a couple of emails to CBC early on, not because I'm a nationalist or so, but it's not a Pfizer vaccine. And the vaccine has been invented and designed by a small company, BioNTech in Germany. And they needed only Pfizer for the mass production. So the whole kind of design is actually the one from a competitor, Germany. So anyway, it's nothing to do with Brexit. But each country with availability of this who bought the kind of thing would have had the same kind of thing. Think about here in Canada, we needed also our time because the Canadian government, again, for good reasons, supported by arguments from the public health experts, not only Canada and other parts of the world, they needed a time really to approve it. I personally feel good about it, because I don't want to get a vaccine that has been got permission under those kind of emergency conditions. I would rather wait for 2 weeks, and it was not longer. So nothing to do with Brexit, actually. This was kind of ideology, one of those funny arguments brought forward by this very incompetent health guy from the UK government, and nobody was taking it seriously. So, you know, let's see, but there may be other opportunities coming. So I'm not saying it's not possible, but you know, and the same kind of thing. I mean, the distribution scheme for the vaccines and the kind of the purchase strategy of the EU. There's a lot of critique. I'm belonging also. I would also be a bit critical this way, but the general idea is, you know, and this is, I feel very strong with that. The EU was trying to act as a group, because there are some countries in the European Union, small ones, who don't have the financial power to buy early on vaccines that are not really, was not clear whether they will work or not. Huge amounts of money we're talking about. So purchasing the whole thing together and working out a distribution scheme actually is a sign of solidarity, actually, not national vaccine or vaccine nationalism we can observe in many parts. So again, I would be I'm not saying everything has been done right, but I would be good. So Israel is number one in vaccination. That's good. With all the political problems it is going through, I totally agree. But then again, if you think about it, I mean, first of all, it's still, with this whole COVID thing, you know, we are talking about a very small country in terms of population, in terms of size. It's also, that's a good thing. And others are saying it's not a good thing. In this regard, I think so. It's a good thing. The health service in Israel is highly digitalized. So everybody is part of this kind of registered and has access for the health service. So they know exactly, they can tell you, please be at 3:40 at this kind of vaccination station or so. Something impossible in Canada, for example, given the size of the country. So again, for me, you know, a lot of those comparisons turned out to make a lot of sense. Think about, at the beginning, it was everybody saying, look at Sweden, they do it absolutely fantastic. There is no lockdown, there is nothing, and so on and so on. This was the kind of the case, and it turned out catastrophe. So, you know, I think so we need probably 2 years in order to see what kind of strategy really worked. So Israel is great. I'm happy that they are moving forward. It's a good thing. But then again, also there's this argument, even as long as there is in Israel, you only can create herd immunity if you also vaccinate the Palestinian citizens of Israel, so to say. And that's something that at very, very end. And that's at least what I hear from some experts. I'm not an expert in those kind of things, but what I want to say is pretty much like here, you need to vaccinate. That is the most vulnerable parts of the population. And so that's probably what needs to go forward. But still, Israel is in a good way. They will do that and early on, and then they are in a great situation. This will also bring a lot of economic advantages, you know, not only for daily life and all those kind of things, but it will open up huge opportunities. So that's great. There is, I think so, the Jewish nation can be proud about it, despite all those kind of political problems. They were able to go through with this kind of thing. So that's fantastic.
Professor Hübner,
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Topical, fascinating,
Very fascinating.
and very, very much appreciated. I think we all feel a little more knowledgeable and intelligent. Thank you so much. Yes, thank you for taking your time out to do this tonight.
Yeah, thanks for attending, and enjoy your evening.
And everyone stay safe. We'll see you hopefully February 11th. Paul Evans will be doing a talk on has the Cold War with China begun? So we're moving from the UK to China. Thank you so much, everyone. Good night. And thank you to David behind the scenes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye now.
Night.
Cheers.